In my first year of college, I dove into a whirlwind of experiences and discoveries, especially as I adapted to my roommate, Alex. He was a bit of an odd guy, and to this day, I'm not entirely sure if I believe he did that to me. From the start, it was clear that Alex and I were very different. While he was reserved, keeping few friendships and rarely leaving the dorm, I was always involved in social activities, trying to make the most of college life. We bonded primarily over our shared interest in SKA music, which, according to the housing department, was what brought us together. Over time, I began to notice something mysterious about Alex. He didn't have visitors and avoided social interactions beyond what was strictly necessary. At times, I wondered if he was just reserved, or if there was more behind that calm facade. Additionally, I suspected he might be gay or something similar. Although he had had girlfriends before, he showed no interest in staying or interacting with women. But I wasn't sure yet. However, in the relaxed atmosphere of the college campus, I was living life to the fullest, perhaps even too much. Parties and alcohol-fueled nights became a common routine for me. Unfortunately, this relentless pursuit of fun led me to some moments I'd rather forget. One particular night, I was completely out of control. I couldn't remember how I got back to the dorm, but I knew I was extremely drunk. My mind was foggy and my memories were fragmented. Slowly, I was awakened by a strange and disturbing dream. In the dream, I was lying in bed when I felt a presence beside me. I opened my eyes to see Alex standing beside me, removing his pants menacingly. A sense of panic gripped me when I realized his intentions. In the dream, I tried to move, but my movements were slow and clumsy, as if I were trapped in a nightmare. Alex leaned over me, and fear turned to desperation. When I realized what he was about to do, I forced my body to react, rolling to the side with a desperate push. Then he started trying to take off my pants. In the dream, I watched the scene unfold before my eyes, as if I were watching a scary movie. Finally, I managed to move, and I pushed Alex with surprising force, sending him flying across the room, until he collided with his own bed. He fell backward, wearing only his underwear while I sat there, breathless and confused. I woke up suddenly, sweating and disoriented. My eyes adjusted to the darkness of the room, but the feeling of discomfort persisted. I looked around and realized Alex was no longer there. Later that day, I saw him in the hallways with a swollen lip, a disturbing evidence that made me question the reality of what happened that confusing night. Determined to understand the situation without jumping to conclusions, the discomfort persisted. Every interaction with Alex became tense and strange. I couldn't look him in the eyes without feeling a mixture of distrust and fear. As weeks passed, the atmosphere in the dormitory became increasingly oppressive. That's when Michael, one of the guys from the next room, approached me with an unexpected proposal. "Hey man, I was thinking, if you want, we can switch rooms. I have an open space in my dorm," Michael said, with a sympathetic look. The offer came as a relief. I knew I needed a change. I nodded gratefully, accepting the proposal without hesitation. The night I moved into Michael's room, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. However, the incident with Alex left an emotional scar that I knew would take time to heal. I began to reflect on my choices and behaviors during that first semester. College was a time of discovery, but also a phase of self-discovery and learning. I promised myself to be more mindful of my choices and boundaries. As I moved into the second semester, I kept close contact with Lucas, my best friend, and started exploring new interests and activities outside the realm of wild parties. With time, I noticed Alex becoming more reclusive and distant. He avoided interactions with other dorm mates and seemed to carry an invisible burden on his shoulders. The few superficial conversations we had became even more scarce. Meanwhile, my friendship with Lucas grew stronger. He became my confidant, someone I could share my doubts and frustrations with. Together, we explored new places in the city and engaged in philosophical conversations during late-night study sessions. Despite the positive changes in my life, the incident with Alex still loomed like a shadow. I continued to reflect on that night, trying to understand what really happened and how it affected my worldview. By the end of the second year, I looked back and realized how much I had learned from that experience. I discovered that college life goes beyond parties and appearances. It's about cultivating genuine relationships and prioritizing my emotional well-being. I never arrived at a definitive conclusion about what truly happened that night. And truthfully, I think I prefer it that way. I could hardly believe it when I discovered the true colors of my roommate, Jack. At first, he seemed like a nice guy, friendly and eager to make friends. But as the days passed, I noticed little strange things that left me uneasy. First were Jack's nightly outings. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see him sneaking out of the room, returning hours later with a somber demeanor and clothes stained with red. At the time, I tried not to dwell on it too much, convincing myself that maybe he just had odd-nighting habits. Then came the straying objects he kept hidden in his closet. A leather-bound book with mysterious symbols on the cover, an ancient dagger that looked like it belonged in a museum. All of this started to worry me. Finally, I decided to follow Jack one night. I saw him leave again, and without thinking twice, I stealthily followed him to a secluded clearing in the woods around campus. I hid behind a tree, watching in silence. What I saw in that clearing chilled me to the bone. Jack was there, surrounded by lit candles, reciting strange words in a language I didn't recognize. The atmosphere was heavy, and I felt a shiver down my spine as I realized I was witnessing something beyond my understanding. In a panic, I returned to my room, trying to process what I had seen. I began researching occult practices and dark rituals, trying to understand what Jack was involved in. Each discovery left me more frightened. Finally, I gathered the courage to confront Jack. I needed answers. He was visibly surprised to see me so serious and determined. When I questioned him about his strange activities, his demeanor changed, becoming cold and calculating. It was at that moment that I decided to contact the authorities. I presented all the evidence I had found: Jack's strange behaviors, the ominous objects, the ritual site in the clearing. I explained everything in detail, despite feeling profound fear. The following weeks were the most agonizing of my life. I was placed under protective custody as a key witness while the police investigated Jack. Each heartbeat was a mix of relief and terror. I received the news of Jack's arrest with a strange sense of triumph mixed with persistent fear. The police had found disturbing evidence linking him to unsolved disappearances in the area. I knew I had narrowly escaped. As the semester drew to a close, I moved out of the dorm, trying to leave the horrors of that year behind. But something inside me knew that the shadows surrounding Jack were just the beginning of an indescribable evil that I preferred not to encounter. The days that followed that incident at the university were marked by a mix of relief and unease. I couldn't shake the images of that macabre ritual in the clearing, nor the dark expressions in Jack's eyes when I confronted him. To distract myself, I focused on my studies, but unwanted memories persisted. Those weeks under police protection were exhausting. I felt safe, yet trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. When I finally returned home for summer vacation, I hoped to find peace and forget the terror I had experienced at the university. However, the feeling of being watched continued to haunt me. The slightest noise in the dead of night made me shiver, wondering if Jack could find a way to seek revenge. As the days passed, I started receiving anonymous calls. No one spoke on the other end, just disturbing silence. I tried to ignore it, but paranoia consumed me more and more. Was it Jack? Or perhaps some dark follower of his cult? I decided to investigate on my own, digging into information about Jack and his previous activities. Surprisingly, I discovered that his past was filled with mysteries and dark connections. He came from a family known for their ties to occult practices and mysticism. One night, while browsing through these findings, I heard slow, dragging footsteps outside my house. My heart raced, A familiar chill ran down my spine. Without a second thought, I called the police. The minutes that followed were pure agony. Every shadow seemed to conceal an imminent threat. When the police finally arrived, they searched the area around the house but found no one. I was starting to believe I was becoming paranoid. The days that followed that night brought a sense of relief. The anonymous calls stopped, and there were no more signs of intruders. Gradually, I began to rebuild my life, albeit cautiously. The next academic year was approaching rapidly, and I found myself hesitant to return to the university. The memory of Jack and his occult activities continued to haunt my thoughts. Nevertheless, I knew I needed to move forward and leave the past behind. At the beginning of my second year at university, I did my best to avoid any dark memories from the past. I tried to reintegrate into university life, focusing on my studies and the new friendships that emerged. However, fate seemed to have other plans for me. During one of the classes, a local newspaper was distributed to the students. A headline immediately caught my attention: Trial of Jack Thompson, accused of heinous crimes. My heart almost stopped. I couldn't believe Jack was being tried for his crimes. Curious and terrified at the same time, I decided to attend the trial. Sitting in the courtroom, I heard terrible details about what Jack had done. He was accused of multiple kidnappings and ritualistic murders. Witnesses described macabre practices involving human sacrifices and worship of dark entities. Just hearing those words made me tremble. Jack looked in my direction during the trial, his eyes cold and vacant. I knew he recognized me. If it weren't for my decision to report him, I could have been one of his victims. The trial was swift, and Jack was found guilty of all crimes, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As I listened to the verdict, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. After all, I shared the same space with a monster. Looking back today, I wonder how I could have been so blind to the signs. The experience taught me to trust my instincts and never underestimate the evil that can hide behind a friendly facade. Thank you for watching my first YouTube video until here. If you want to help me create more videos like this, please subscribe and leave a like. Have good dreams.